I love, as you might notice, I love to play with ideas.
Yes.
Um, and I love to hear what other people have to say. And so from my perspective, this is a chance to hear you and you can hear me. So you'll probably say yes to that, whatever
Yeah,
comes in front of you.
absolutely.
Okay. So to start, um, I would just love to hear, why do you care, Paul? Like, I know you're asking me questions, but I want to know why you care, because I think that's awesome.
Okay.
Why do you care about these
I
questions?
hmm. So there is an incredibly long answer to that question, but I'm
Okay.
trying to think of how to say that in as short and concise a way as I know how to. Um, and I think it's because, well, I actually there is a very concise way to say this, and it goes to I have to use kind of a theater word or an acting term, and that's stake. I think what makes a show interesting if you go to the theater is when you see actors who have a stake in what happens, right? And if the actors don't care if this happens or if that happens, there's no stake in it. You know what I mean? Anything can happen, it doesn't matter. So the actor has no motivation. So as soon as the actor has a stake in the question, um, so you tell an actor, okay, you're up there and you're in the middle of this long conversation, but you have to go to the bathroom really bad. All of a sudden, the actor has a stake in what happens, right? You've given them a motivation that's powerful, and it's a powerful motivation. It's not the actor up there being bored or being boring. The actor wants the actor has to go to the bathroom, and there's this person preventing them from getting to do that. And so now the actor wants to end this conversation and wants to end it in a hurry and is very motivated. So in a sense, that's my story. Um, that not that I have to go to the bathroom and I'm talking to a boring person, but in a sense, my story is that I have a stake in this in the sense that I was raised in a very fundamentalist evangelical background. And if you ever wanted to give an actor the ultimate motivation, tell them that they can either do this or go to hell, right? Eternal conscious torment, right? It's the ultimate motivator. It's the ultimate fear-based motivator. And
Yeah.
so being raised in a religion that's deeply rooted in hell theology, gave me a very early stake in these sorts of conversations because how you answer the question about God and the nature of creation and our relationship with God, um, if part of that answer involves hell, um, and especially if part of that answer involves certain classes of people, such as gay people, for example, just a random
Right. Yeah.
category of people that I may or may not be a part of. Um, um,
I'm queer. I'm queer. I'll just stand up. Go ahead. Keep going.
exactly, exactly. So that's for me. I have a stake in this question, and it's a very deeply rooted one. And it doesn't matter how far I get from my background, that's always in there.
Yes.
And it gets triggered very easily, I would say, by religious conversations. And I think a lot of people don't realize how the words that they use, even small words to talk about their faith, have an impact that affects my daily living. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Um, so, I think one of my favorite examples came to me free of charge when I was talking to an atheist who told me that we were talking about health stuff, and this atheist deadpan said to me, "Well, our bodies were not designed to eat XYZ." And immediately, as soon as this atheist said our bodies were not designed, I thought, well, isn't that an interesting word choice that you just used? Um, because without intending to, you just revealed something to me. Um, something about what you actually seem to believe, whether you realize it or not, that there is a design. Because if our bodies are have just evolved this way, then if I eat different kinds of foods, there's no design that's going to step in. My body will evolve to accept this new food that I'm eating, right? Um, and so if there is no design, then I should be able to eat whatever is in front of me, just as my ancestors did, and my body will evolve itself. It designs itself to accommodate whatever, or I die, I mean, that's the other
Right.
possibility, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but to use the word design as if there was intention behind the way
Yeah.
my body processes food, and that some things fall within that design and some things fall outside of that design, um, suggests an intelligent designer. Um, Anyway, I'm sorry, that was a big aside, but it's a great
No, yeah.
illustration of how just a tiny word choice completely affects how you are in the world and what you believe and what you truly believe deep down. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are unaware of how a tiny word, um, like referring to God as a male, or like, uh, talking about God in any number of different ways, just tiny little words drastically impact how we live in the world.
Hmm. Yeah. It's like it shows where the tracks are, where the record player lives. Even if we change the language, it's still there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Awesome.
So
Very
I,
cool.
I guess that's the I'm sorry that was still a long answer to your very simple
No,
question.
please. I'm like I'm in heaven. Thank you. I'm just so glad to be with you. Your energy's lovely and I'm happy. So whatever
Yeah,
you do is great.
likewise.
Um, so so you're this religious triggers are there, but meanwhile you're in the conversation of God.
Hmm.
And we got to this conversation through a kind of a track around worship, which is a word.
Yes.
Yeah, that we use, but um
Yeah.
so anything you want to say about that?
Yeah. When I was in college, I did a paper on Johann Sebastian Bach, particularly a piece of music that he wrote, called the St. John Passion. And it's a piece of music that's written about the death of Jesus. Um, and in doing my research, I came upon somebody who was a fantastic musician and a theologian. And this person commented in his writing um, that Bach's and the Lutheran theology that informed Bach's music, um, I want to get this right, as best as I can. I want to say this perspective in a way that, because it hit me profoundly in a good way. He said, Lutheran theology differs from maybe other theology in the sense that um, that I think where maybe conventional wisdom would say that Jesus is this powerful being, God of the universe, right? Who sets aside being powerful in order to come to Earth and have this earthly experience, and then finishing and maybe culminating that experience with this traumatic death. Um, and 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 I think there's language in the Bible that supports the idea that maybe Jesus was willing to go there because after that, Jesus ascends on a throne and then gets to lord it over everybody. And basically after dying on the cross, Jesus was willing to go through that because afterward, then Jesus ascends this throne and everybody says, "Oh, you are amazing and I am unworthy." And that throne is actually Jesus's goal, and that you endure what you have to get to that. Okay. But
Okay.
Lutheran theology would suggest that and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but what I took away from that is that Lutheran theology would suggest that it's actually in that moment of service that Jesus is on the throne.
Yes.
That actually our ideas of domination and thrones and ruling and all of that are upside down. So it is actually not that you become that you are a servant in order to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, but that it's literally while you are in service, while you are doing what you are doing to serve other people, that you are the greatest.
Yeah.
It's not I'm doing this to be the king and so that everybody will say how amazing I am and worship me, but that's literally the goal right there. The service itself is the goal, and that is the greatest thing in the world, is to be a servant.
Oh, I
um
love it. Yeah, and
and
least is
and
first
that
and la la la.
concept, ooh, that concept completely tipped my whole world on end when I read that. And I thought, wow, that completely changes everything for me in a good way. Because I've always disliked this idea of, oh, you're so amazing and I'm just nothing. I'm a worm, and only you deserve praise, and of myself I can do nothing. Without you I'm useless. Without you I am a wretch, and on and on and on. And but you, on the other hand, are so amazing. and
Right.
um and it begs the question, well, you know did God really create a bunch of worms for the sole purpose of showing off how great God is? Um,
Right.
and what I love about this kind of theology um, is that while I don't think I can really get on board with the idea of of being in worship of somebody sitting on a throne for eternity. I can get on board very much. I love to work. I love to do, you know. And
Uh-huh.
and as I look out at creation and I see this incredible world that that is detailed beyond human description or understanding. Its balance, how planets rotate around each other, how the Earth is in just the right place to support life, that the water freezes sometimes and melts at other times, and it's just the right temperature. There's that very, very narrow, in the extreme
Yes.
possibility of temperature, we live
Yes.
in that perfect spot.
Hmm.
And it's such a mind-boggling thing to me that I think, okay, here's this being who has a love of intricate design, and has a love of variety. And I look at all the different animals and nature and all of that, And so I think to myself, it's a very different thing to wake up in the morning and say, okay, creator of the universe, what are we going to do together today? What are we going to create? What are we going to discover? What are we going to nurture? What are we going to what possibilities are going to come forward today that we never dreamed could come forward? What is it like to live in cooperation with somebody that is a being that is so imaginative and so detailed and so creative and who loves diversity and who's just endlessly creative? That's a very different kind of relationship to than waking up in the morning and saying, I suck and you're amazing. And what do you command me to do today?
Yeah.
What's my to-do list that I have to do, where I have no choice in the matter, no creativity, where my it's a question, what am I even, why do I even have consciousness
Mhm.
if all you want is me to continuously say you're amazing and I'm useless?
Right.
And what commands do I need to do? How do I need to lay down my life um, for you this day? What are you going to require of me that I don't want to do? You know,
Yes.
um, it's just night and day for me, the perspective difference. And if I don't do it right, I'm going to hell, right? And so I guess I better do this, even though I don't want to, even though it sucks, even though you really are going to ask a lot of things from me that I don't want to do. I will give you my undying allegiance and I will serve you for all of my days, because if you don't, I'm going to hell. Um, I will love you with all my heart. I promise I will, I will, because
Yeah.
please, 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 I don't want to go to hell.
Right.
And that's what I was, when I was a child, I was raised with that, that idea of I would lay in bed with my heart racing at night, praying, dear God, please don't send me to hell. I I don't know how to do what I need to do to make you happy, but I don't want to go to hell. Please, 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 please,
Uh,
please. But still being terrified, like I don't know if I'm going to heaven or not. I think I did all the right things. I asked Jesus into my heart like I was supposed to, but I'm still not sure if I did it right, or what if somebody got something wrong and I'm still going to hell. And then of course finding out I was gay, and I'm like, well, there's that, there's the end of it all.
You're just
um
SOL.
yeah, exactly, stage of life. I mean, no. So anyway, when I saw the post about worship, for me worship just automatically brings up that single word, just like we said before, a single word embodies a whole set of ideas. So talking about worship, and especially a God who seeks worship, that word seeking, that God is seeking worship and worshipers, um, is very triggering for me. It brings up all of those ideas of a whole theology of, again, putting Jesus back in the spot where Jesus came to die, just so that Jesus could go back and sit on a throne and rule over everybody and tell everybody what to do and have everybody say how amazing Jesus is, and how useless I am. So that, for me, worship has always been a negative word that I'm just extremely uncomfortable with. I think, if a parent said to me, I'm going to have children, and I'm going to have children because I want little people to gather around my knees and tell me how amazing I am and do my dishes for me and cook my meals for me and support me when I'm old and stuff, I would be
Yeah.
like, wow, you're one selfish person. I don't think you should be having kids. But
Yeah.
then we turn around and say, okay, but that's okay for God. It's not okay for a human parent to be that way, but it's okay for God to be that way. And I think
Right.
when we accept something and say, this wouldn't be okay for me to do, but it's totally okay for God because that's how God is and we can't
Right.
understand it.
Hmm.
We That affects our morality, our sense
Yes.
of morality. Thank you.
Perfect. Hallelujah. Ah.
That changes our morality, that affects us in a way that we
Yes, it
don't
does.
consciously even realize, I think, when
Hmm.
we say it's not okay for me as a person to want to do this, but it's okay for God to want to do this.
Yes.
And
And
so
there,
and so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
where my rub gets. I get all cranky when I see that word.
I understand.
But I also don't want to be one of those people who gets limited by their own prejudices and um, who can only operate in a world where people are careful around their triggers. And
Yes,
you know what I mean? I want to
yes.
be able to evolve as a person past my triggers to be able to interact with the world of normal people. Um, so I think that's why when you did suggest how you view it, I was like, oh, okay, I can see that.
Mm,
So it's not that I'm not willing to reconsider my understanding of that word or hear a different perspective on that word. Um, so I guess that's where I was. We started to dialogue a little bit there, and it was fun for me to see. You don't often offer, even though you have great ideas, and you're very free thinking person with with a very analytical mind.
mm,
You have a lot to offer, but you don't often offer because you are maintaining the space for other people to offer.
mm,
So I was appreciative that you put yourself out there with a response that where you talked a little bit about your perspective on it and your take on it. And I'm still, even though now I've really ranted on my thoughts on this, I'm still very open, even if I don't sound like I'm open. I
no, you
really
are.
am, to hearing a different perspective and letting you say, well, that's not my experience. I I I I honor what you've been through and where you're coming from, and I see your point, but here's how it looks for me.
I think everything you've said is awesome. Like I'm with you 100%. Um, I'm with you 100%. Um, I'm actually really loving this perspective that you're talking about very overtly about it's in the service. It's in the where the rubber meets the road. Um,
Yes.
that we are, that's where it's all at. That's where that's where we are connected, to use my
Yes.
words, instead of weird theological words. Um, so because like I don't like I'm not thrown to be first, right? So like it's easy to be last, but easier. But it's like the in order to letting go of all this in order to, and that's I think is behind, if we have this picture of God needing this and not firing our asses and all that stuff, that everything's in order to like get my butt out of the fire and everybody else's butt out of the fire, come hell or high water, even if I have to pretend they're my friend, or I have to hurt them or kill them, or like there's no end, because
Yeah.
the evil good person, God, is gonna get us otherwise. I mean, it's just awful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
I
go ahead.
I actually have a question for you. Yeah, when the time is right. So, and that maybe is not now, but when you see an opening for it, I would love to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah, sure. No.
Oh, so my question is that I understand you have a legal background,
No,
um, trained as a lawyer.
no,
No?
no, not at all.
Oh, I'm completely misinformed about that. You've always been an Episcopal minister.
No, I'm not that either.
Oh,
Isn't that funny?
I, ah,
Maybe you're conflating me.
yes, I am. Okay. I got very confused actually. I have to admit, I this is super embarrassing. I don't often pay attention to details, and I'm glad I asked that question because I um you are Wendy Wolf, and I thought I was talking to Wendy Huber.
Oh, funny.
And so when I saw you show up on the video, I thought, "Oh, that's funny. She doesn't look how I remember her
Oh,
looking."
funny. So you know Wendy
And
Huber. I know the name.
oh my gosh, I am so this is
Well,
hilarious.
life
I
and
I
I
I
swirled you into this conversation.
so this is hilarious. I thought I knew who I was talking to. So now I have to admit, Wendy, I have no idea who you are.
Oh, I was so liking that I was so insightful before. And I do, though, I do really make a lot of space for other people's um perspective. I think it's important. Um,
So Wendy, I just have to know who are you?
well, we did have a
And I'm
conversation.
so glad I met you,
It's
but
it's
and we're having this whole
sometimes these things
conversation because
happen.
I thought
One of,
we
yeah, one of my very best friends,
go
one of my
ahead.
best friends in the whole world who I like love. I met him. He came, I've invited him to a party because I thought he was somebody else. I invited
Yes,
him. I thought I was inviting this person. I invited this person. He came and,
yes.
and like, so you just never know. Yeah, but we did interact on my site and you were interacting with me like like you did it often, but I didn't know who you were.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's because I thought I knew who you were. So Wendy Huber is an Episcopal minister who lives near to me here. Which also I was perplexed why you wanted to meet on Zoom because
Um,
why don't we just have a cup of coffee in person, you know?
and then I'm like, well, you could tape it. You're like, this is weird.
Yeah, I thought I really the whole thing struck me as a little strange, but I thought, Wendy's doing all kinds of out of the box stuff, so and she is, I believe, trained as a lawyer, before she was trained as an Episcopal minister, but now I have no idea who I'm talking to, and I love that I'm talking to you, but I would love to know more about who you are.
Awesome. Okay, so um my name is Wendy, and I actually have, don't tell anyone, I actually have three faces on Facebook.
Okay.
And the one that we interacted on is Rev Wendy, which
Okay.
is an earned title. Um, but um, I'm not a Christian in ways that most people would understand Christian.
Gotcha.
I walk with Jesus
Hmm.
in real time. Like I'm a mystic. So
Yes.
I talk to him.
Yes.
And he I'm in a slightly different relationship with him now because he led me through the dark night. He led me through the dark night like white on rice.
Uh-huh.
Um and uh got me out. And be he didn't do it, but he coached me. He'd show up, and coach me. Um so I'm a mystic and I am all about, like, I used to be like more regular Christian in my very early life, but I've had two major deconstructions
Mhm.
very quickly. The first one was when I was just turned 12 and I went for my confirmation. And right before then, I was doing rosary, I was Catholic, doing rosary every day. Like I was like, on my knees, all the things, I was devoted. And Mary showed up.
Uh-huh.
And like now, like I talk to her, like it's normal. But like then it
Yes.
was just like breaking through the into a new different reality. And it burst me into what you might into that reality in which magic and miracles live, in which there's something completely different going on. And so then I went for my confirmation, and there's the bishop and I'm like terrified because I'm very shy, and I'm like, don't call on me, right? Like, so part of me is all human, like, don't pay it. And then part of me is like, what the hell? There's bells and whistles and big hats and this and that, and there's no magic.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just like, this is not real.
Yeah.
These authorities don't know what they're talking about. Right? So like that was my first deconstruction, and then on into science and agnosticism and all that stuff. And in my second, I'd gone into a um home, what's it called? Home church. I was done with the stupid religion stuff, right? Like, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying these authorities. I'm not buying all their, letters after their name. I'm not buying like we're supposed to bow down to them. But in the home church, I was like, these people, like, God love here. They love each other. Like, this is real. It's real here. And
Hmm.
there's experience of the direct experience that is real for me. So that's great, except for that I bought the package. I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I've had this experience. I'm talking to Jesus. I'm doing this. I must have to buy all this other stupid stuff.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, I was young. I was 17. Like, I bought the package, and it was drilled. Like, my friends were like drilling it in me. You know how it is. Just drilling it like this, therefore that, this, therefore that. And I was like, all right. But what I had to do to accept it all is to just I said to God, I'm like, look, I'm all in. This is like, I've been looking for this, but you have to take my brain, because my brain's like, this is just stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all of
Yes.
this is ridiculous. So I gave God my brain, and I had this wonderful year honeymoon with that group and with the divine. And then a year later comes back Jesus. All right, now it's time to get your brain back. I'm like, no. But like, I'm in deconstruction before I know it. It's just like,
Yeah.
and then since then, it's been this like, all right, like there's the whole church thing and religion and Bible. And then there's also the world and science and what works, and then there's so many things, right? And there's also like, how do I be this and this? How do I be this and this? So my whole book is all about how can I be queer and Christian? How can I be um psychic or mystic and love God? How can I, like, it's just like, all, and now I do it like it's like nothing, like I'm there, but it
Yeah.
took forever. I'm like old, like, it took forever. And I along the way, I found some tools that helps me as a mystic to be able to understand this and that and hold it and make change and be with what is, which is kind of intense in the physical and in
Yes.
the spiritual worlds. It's intense. So anyway, blah blah blah. That's a lot about me, but that's
No, no,
basically.
I'm fascinated by this,
Oh,
by your
oh, good.
story,
Yeah.
especially because I didn't know any of
So in the Rev Wendy space, the straight up is that I'm speaking, meaning to speak in Christian language and paradigms in service of the real connection.
Yes.
And that means, I mean, I really I care less about doctrine, and I care less about what people would do with the Bible. I've gotten very blessed by the Bible my whole life in lots of different ways, but it doesn't, it's not, it's my servant. It's not my master.
Yes.
Um, and as is the church. I was out of the church forever, ever, decades and decades. And I was called back 7 years ago for 2 years. And it served me. And I served them and it served me. And then I was called out again.
Hmm.
Like, and so anyway, that's the person you were talking to. And I have two other people. One is like more deconstructive, post-Christian, uh, beyond, free range. But really it's about the consciousness that is not hooked by all this.
Hmm.
Um, and then my first one is from I what I do is for like real life, like my regular life, what I do is I share inner tools, you can say, that go below everyday consciousness, or that uh, help access spiritually from our soul, spiritually, what the things that I'm talking about in ways
Hmm.
that are not overwhelming or unsafe or too much or too little. Like there's a whole lot of people out there that are empaths, they're super suffering by
Yes.
taking on everybody else's stuff, and that's handleable. And then there's people who are like, this whole thing, I want to be able to experience the divine, but I can't. And like, how do we turn it
Hmm.
up? And like, so that's what I do in my everyday life. And so you can call that mystic, you can call it subtle, you can call it um, intuitive, you can call it psychic, whatever you call it. That's who I talk to there, that are more like, all right, well, let's just have direct experience and do shit.
Yes.
So
Well, that's
yeah.
fascinating, Wendy. It's also fascinating to me uh, that oh that I think if you're born into a faith like Christianity, um and and there's nothing about you that challenges nothing about you intrinsically that challenges that whole worldview, um then you never really get to you never really get to question or to deconstruct, because it all works for you, and frankly I don't think it really does, but it works well enough that it never pushes you to reconsider everything the whole all the underpinnings of what you were of the world in which you were raised or in which you live. But if, like us, you're raised in a faith that where who you are doesn't fit in and doesn't match what you're told,
Hmm.
um, then it almost forces you into this reconsideration of the whole thing,
Hmm.
and it makes you kind of set it all aside and say, okay, well, if this isn't real, if this isn't how things really are, then how are they? What are they?
I
and
love that.
and and there's all of this possibility, right? There's a world of possibility, and um and you get to start reimagining things and saying, well, if what if it's this, does that work? What if it's that, does that work? And as you work through these things and you compare them with the actual real life that is around you, um it's an opportunity that I think most people don't receive. And I think it's the luck of the draw that being born gay, um, I was forced to reconsider something that I probably wouldn't have reconsidered. I probably would
Mm,
still be involved deeply in evangelical fundamentalist religion, And I
Mm,
probably never would have pushed past that into something that's more real and that fits life the way it is, rather than life the way that they pretend it is.
yeah,
And that's what I recognize in your story
yeah.
is that it's we both had, it sounds like, the same piece that pulled us out of just going along with everybody else, um, all the lemmings running along happily together. It kind of I don't know, if I don't want to project onto you, but when you tell your story, it sounds so familiar to me, in the sense that I also recognize having to go through deconstruction,
Mhm,
and then having to build something new out of it. And I think a lot of people who do go through what we went through, a lot of people just react to the whole thing and throw it all out. I'm going to be
yes.
an atheist. And I'm amazed at how many of my fundamentalist friends turned into fundamentalist atheists.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating to me because when they were in fundamentalist Christianity, they had this commitment to a type of Christianity that is exclusive, where you have to be
Hmm.
very evangelical in your approach. You have to tell everybody that
Hmm.
their sinner is going to hell, so that you can save them. Now they are fundamentalist atheists who are still in an exclusive group who believe everybody else is wrong,
Hmm.
right? As an atheist, you kind of have to believe I'm the only one who's right in this, because if you believe in any religion at all, you're wrong, right? Um, and um, and so you have to kind of sit there in the same space once again, where you're right, everybody else is wrong, and you've got
Right.
to convince everybody around you. You've got to be evangelical in your approach and tell them how wrong they are to believe in whatever religion they happen to be wrapped up in. But the
Hmm.
bottom line is, you went from one exclusive religion to another exclusive religion, and
Hmm.
I think that's a real tendency among people who are raised in fundamentalism, perhaps.
Hmm.
But I enjoy the fact that I get to still hold on to aspects of um of spirituality without throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of the record I was saying, we're just playing the
Yes,
same record in a different
groove.
language. And the same thing
Yeah,
happens the other way. Like people go lots of things. I mean, we can go flex, like we're talking about. We can go like out of that particular whatever it's called on the record. Um, we can go toward atheism, or there's a whole set of people who are going toward like I'm God, I'm the oneness. I'm not saying that's not real. I'm just
yeah,
saying that it's the way of being about it is the same.
yeah.
And it's irksome.
Yes, yeah. Fair enough.
Because really, and it's just that it's ego identity. It's all ego identity.
Yeah.
Um, so it's one of the thing that it's one of my drums that I hit because it's just so
Yes.
irksome. It's like this is not helping anyone actually experience transcendence,
Yeah.
from my perspective. So yeah. Um, and I just to complete about like I see myself as walking in the way of Jesus, however you want to say it, not because of
Yeah.
doctrine, but because
Yeah.
of I'm actually doing I believe I'm doing what he said to do. I'm
Yeah.
raised on the regular, big and small ways, lifting up my cross, getting on it, dying, and becoming new. And that might sound like I'm so like special, but it's like that's the way. It's like let's all do this and following Jesus. That's the way. And doing what he always was talking about, the gospel, Jesus gospel, which is from my perspective, to be experiencing the realm or the reign of heaven divine, is like it's the thing from my perspective. And that's all like lost in all this other stuff. It's like
Mhm.
the realm of heaven is here. What are we gonna do about it? Turn.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah,
that's
that's a
my learning
whole
process.
nother, when you say the realm of heaven, it's really another word for the kingdom of heaven, right?
Yes.
Which if you really, that was another big revelation for me, is that raised in evangelical Christianity, the kingdom of heaven has the word heaven in it, and heaven is after this life. But if you and that's that understanding is so entrenched that it actually makes the gospels very confusing if you think of it that way. But I'm on the staff of a church. I'm a music director, and in one of our staff meetings, we were talking about heaven and hell, and the pastor at that time said, "I absolutely believe in hell," um, and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. And so I decided, rather than just rely on what I thought I remembered, I would go back and reread all four gospels, and I started a spreadsheet. And every time the Jesus talked about either heaven or hell, in any context or in any way, I added that verse to my spreadsheet, and with details about, what Jesus was saying about it, whether it was a description of it, or whether it's somebody going there, or whether it's how to get there, how to be part of the kingdom of heaven, whatever. But what came out of that is I discovered that when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven, he is almost never talking about it as a future destination. And a lot of people who talk to Jesus about it were asking about a future destination, and then he would answer them with an answer that talks about the kingdom of heaven as if it's a frame of mind, or how you a philosophy of living, right? He would, when that I'm trying to remember, when somebody comes to Jesus and says, how do I get into the kingdom of heaven? He says, well, what does the Bible say? And he says, well, love your neighbor as yourself. And he's like, well, you're not far from the kingdom of heaven. And when he says that, it's like, wait, is that, if the kingdom of heaven is after you're dying, Jesus is saying you're about to die. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? So what
Yeah.
Jesus is really saying is, your point of view is not far from a point of view that I'm trying to establish here. My kingdom isn't a principality, it's not a place, and it's not a
Mhm.
kingdom with a ruler. It's
Right.
a worldview. It's a way of looking at the world. And that's what the kingdom, that's what Jesus, is, from context, looking at all the different things that Jesus said about the kingdom of heaven. I came away saying the kingdom of heaven isn't a place, it's a state of mind.
Mhm. I would say consciousness. Yes, it's a certain consciousness or perspective. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, I don't know, a good example just comes to me is like we can look at water or we can look at water in a microscope and it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right? And they're both real and happening like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I would say my perspective is that whenever Jesus is speaking as a rule, um, general rule, whenever he's speaking about the kingdom, the realm, the reign, he he's just shortening the whole thing. He's shortening, the good news. When he's talking about the good news and when he's talking about the kingdom, the reign, he's talking about of heaven, God, depending on if it's what, Luke or Matthew. You know, like, he's
Yes.
talking about that all the time. from my perspective. And then sadly, the headspace that most people are in is the Gospel of Paul, which is a different story.
It is. And sometimes contradictory.
So yeah, so we agree a lot. Yeah, yeah. So do you have that spreadsheet? Because that's gold.
Yeah,
Do you
I
have
could
it like
probably find
online?
that and share it with you for sure.
That'd be awesome.
It's
Because
not online, but I think it's a
oh,
Google sheet, and I'm not sure if I completed it. I think I did, but
you're just like,
um,
I'm convinced
you
that's a
know,
good.
but it was enough that I found there were a number of very interesting findings. One of them was that I discovered that the kingdom of heaven is probably one of the most referenced things that Jesus talked about.
Yeah,
It's if you want to understand Jesus, you need to know what Jesus meant by the kingdom of heaven, because that was Jesus's biggest theme, I would say.
yes.
Um, and I would say the second thing that came out of that for me was that um, what I was told about heaven didn't match up. The
Mhm.
whole four spiritual laws, you have to acknowledge that you are a sinner and confess your sins and ask Jesus into your heart and accept him as your Lord and Savior if you want to get to heaven. And it's sort of, those are set up in evangelical Christianity as a sort of railroad ticket to heaven. So if you do these things and if you do them adequately, then you are guaranteed uh, a a castle in heaven, a golden mansion in that giant kingdom up there. Um, and that's kind of how this whole thing is viewed, as a sort of transaction between you and
Yes,
God, right? It's a
yes.
transactional faith where you do something and then God does something.
Right.
And if you do it adequately, God does something. And if
Mhm.
you don't do it adequately, then God does something else. Um, Heaven or hell, basically.
Mhm.
um, if you do things right, then you get the reward of heaven. If you don't do things right, then you get hell. Um,
Mhm.
and it's basically a transactional faith. But reading Jesus's words about heaven, if you look, for example, at Jesus's parable about the rich man who and Lazarus. The rich man is sitting at a table with all this lavish food, and this beggar, Lazarus, comes and asks for the food, and the rich man refuses to give him any food. And then they both die, and Lazarus is taken up to the bosom of Abraham, and the rich man is sent to a place of eternal torment. And that's one of those references that you almost can't really get away from in Jesus's teaching, where the description really does sound a lot like hell, right? But the fascinating thing about that story is that if evangelical Christianity were true, Lazarus would have accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior and
Yeah.
repented of his sin, and then as a reward for that would have been taken up to the bosom of Abraham.
Right.
And the rich man would have been witness to, somebody would have said that the rich man, look, you're a sinner, you have to accept Jesus into your heart. And then the rich man would have said, no, I don't want to do that. I reject the gift of salvation. And so then, of course, the rich man goes to hell. But that's not how the story goes. In this story, the only thing that Lazarus does that lands him in Abraham's bosom is he's poor. He doesn't do anything to get to Abraham's bosom. He's literally, that's the only thing that we know about Lazarus, and is that he's poor. And the only thing the rich man does that lands him in hell is reject Lazarus's humanity and refuse to give his brother food. I mean, they're not literally brothers, but brother human being.
Mhm.
He doesn't. That's the only thing that lands the rich man in hell is his lack of compassion for this poor man who comes begging. And
He's
I
rich
thought,
and he
well,
doesn't share.
all yeah. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, and as you look through all of the examples in the New Testament where Jesus talks about um, the afterlife, there is never a time when Jesus talks about the afterlife and associates it with an evangelical view of Christianity. It's always, and it's mostly in the Gospel of Matthew, it's always something that somebody does that affects their future. Like in when Jesus says talks about separating the sheep and the goats at the end of Matthew, like Matthew 25 perhaps, and Jesus says to he said there will be people that will come to me in that day and say, Lord, Lord, did I not do miracles in your name? Did I not prophesy in your name? And he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you. And then why, what do you, how can you say you didn't know me? Well, he says, you didn't, I was naked and you didn't feed me. I was in prison, you didn't clothe me. There was four things. I'm
Yeah,
might
I
not be
know
able
them.
to pull
Yeah.
them all up in my head. And then vice versa, there'll be people, where he says, sends them off to paradise, and he says, because when I was naked you clothed me, when I was in prison you visited me, when I was sick you took care of me, when I was naked you clothed me. And Lord, when did we do these things to you? Well, in as much as you did them to the least of these, anybody, you did them to me. And
Hmm.
so again, here we have a picture of the afterlife and people being separated into sheep and goats. And again, it's not based on something we believe, but on something we did,
Hmm.
how we treated the people around us. Um, and so it was quite a shock to me, being raised in evangelical Christianity, to see that evangelical Christianity isn't supported by Jesus. This concept of transactional Christianity is not supported by the words of Jesus. Now, in John's gospel is completely different. John continuously talks about what people believe. You have to believe this, you have to believe this, you have to believe this, you have to believe this. John goes on and on and on and on about believing things. And Matthew goes on and on and on about doing things. So if you
Hmm.
read the
You must love
Gospel
that
of
one.
Matthew and you read the Gospel of John, you're like, okay, which Jesus is it?
Hmm.
We've got this bipolar Jesus, and one person is saying that Jesus says that we have to do a whole bunch of things, and the other person is saying that Jesus said that we all have to believe a bunch of things. Um, I
Hmm.
don't know, but the bottom line is, even in John, the idea isn't put out there as, in my way of reading it, that if you believe a certain set of things, that you get to go to a wonderful afterlife, and if you don't believe a bunch of things, you'll go somewhere else.
Hmm.
That's still not the message that Jesus comes across with. Even at the in all of the interactions, like the women at the well, or the Jesus talking to um, the woman washing his feet or whatever. When he's talking to the woman at the well, he doesn't say, well, you need to believe that I am the Messiah, or you're going to hell.
Hmm.
um, he doesn't say to the woman caught in adultery, believe on me and confess your sins, and blah blah blah, and then you get to go to heaven. He just says go and sin no more. He doesn't, and he doesn't even tell her what that means. He doesn't even suggest that what she's doing currently even is sin. He just says go and sin no more, whatever that means to you, I guess. um so it was fascinating to read through the Gospels and see all these references to the kingdom of heaven, and watch how Jesus interacted with people, and see that this whole turn or burn, you sinner, um, mentality that I was raised in, doesn't measure up with how Jesus really interacted with actual people that at least his culture considered to be sinners. If you look at the culture that Jesus was living in, the big notorious sinners of his time were adulterers, just like they are today. We
Mhm.
have our favorite sins,
Yeah.
that we like to label people with. Adulterers, they were tax collectors, they were people who
Hmm.
collaborated with the Roman government or whatever.
Yes.
But these were the sort of notorious sinners, publicans, tax collectors, and stuff.
Hmm.
And when you see Jesus interacting with their so-called notorious sinners, I think that's my cutoff shot. But you don't see Jesus berating them and saying, "Turn or burn, you're going to hell if you don't mend your ways," right? The only people that Jesus freaks out at are the religious people.
Hmm.
And I don't like to make too fine of a point of that, because I think as soon as we like to say, well, yeah, it's those Pharisees over there, it's those religious people over there. I worked with a pastor who liked to substitute, and whenever he saw the word Pharisee, he would say religious people like me, just to
Nice.
bring it home.
Yes.
Unless lest I think I'm better than the
Yes.
Pharisees,
Beautiful.
religious people like me.
Beautiful.
Um,
Yes. Right. Because
but
what do we do? We're thrown. It's the human thing. It's the human thing. This whole evangelicalism, it's all human thinking. It's all human, like
Yeah,
how would we do it if we were God? And the same thing
yeah,
with this the Pharisee thing. It's like, what are we thrown to do? We go to church, we have to look good. We have to be whitewashed tombs. We have
yes.
to be putting on the alleged holy. That's what humans do. And
Mhm.
that's the game we play. And so he's just pointing to what we do of our own accord as religious people, and that's all. It's like
Yeah,
we want to win. We want to win.
yes.
So, like, how do
Tell me
we,
what I have to do to be right, and then I want to be right.
right? And I can't do that, but I can pretend pretty good a few hours a week or whatever, in public.
Yeah,
Don't ask my children.
yeah.
Don't ask my
No,
parents. Don't ask my siblings. You know?
no.
But shh, I am really awesome.
Yes, yes. For this hour every Sunday, I can pull this off.
Yeah, and Jesus is like, enough of
No,
this, I think. And
yeah.
stop
You
using God.
whitewashed sepulcher.
Love that one. It's just so right on. And it's like, I think the more we can own it for ourselves, the more powerful it really is. Um, and the whole using God to get power, and like that made him crazy. And also all those people are trying to kill him, and they're all in the way of his ministry, which is to say,
Yes,
God.
yes. You're
That's my
standing at the
perspective.
gate. You won't go in yourself, but you won't let anybody else in either. You
Yes.
stand at the gate and prevent anybody
Yes.
from going through. You can see how
Frustrating.
it pissed him off.
Totally. It's very frustrating. He's trying to say, like, here's the party. Here's the party. Everyone's invited. Here's the buffet. Here's the wedding feast. And everybody's doing what they do.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'm not going to go, and I'm going to prevent as many people as possible.
Right. Because I like my game and I'm winning and I'm on the top. So no other games.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
So
I think that's the danger of systematic theology. We want systematic theology. We want to build this whole system that explains the whole world and its religious ideas in a way that all the loose ends are all tied up in my systematic theology, right? I've got this whole system, the theory of the atonement, the theory of communion, all the religious rites, how to get to heaven, then
Hmm.
how it works, how it doesn't work, what God does
Hmm.
about it, and we just build this entire structure of theology, this whole systematic theology around it in order to and we become professional theologians, right? I'm so good at this, and I think that encapsulates what the Pharisees were, is they had their systematic theology, and Jesus didn't fit into that. He didn't.
Yeah.
Jesus did not was not the Messiah that they were looking for, because they already had the whole thing built. The whole system was built, and that's the piece that the Messiah occupied in their systematic theology did not match this person from real life. And I think that we also do the same thing continuously. We build our systematic theology, and then when God tries to reveal something to us,
Yeah.
we're not open to it because we already know.
Right.
We already built our entire systematic theology. We can't there is no place for revelation in when all is already known. The whole world is already built, it's complete, and then God tries to show us something, and there's no space for that. There's no room for revelation. The cup is already full.
Right. And I'll say, as a mystic, I own that. I don't know. That's one of your questions coming. But for me, I'm constantly getting revelation. I'm constantly getting new, constantly, like
Yeah.
annoyingly. Like it's wonderful. It's, there's no other better ways to live from my perspective, but it's a pain in the ass. It really, like,
Yes.
I have to change my mind regularly
Yes.
not because some stupid person is babbling at me about their theory, but because I see differently.
Yes.
And then I have to integrate it to pain. Like I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
it's yin
Well,
and
it's
yang.
it's it's living with uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
It's living with the fact that there are things we don't know, and be comfortable with that, and being open. And living continuously open is a lot harder than living with certainty. We, as one of our Christian hymns is, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand."
Yeah.
And we like that idea of standing on solid rock, that my faith is unshakable, and because I know things. And it's a lot harder to say, um, I stand on uncertainty, um, and I live with with questions, and I live with openness, and I remain open continuously to what is, and what is being revealed is a
Right.
very different and a much more difficult way to live, um, than having a nice, orderly, systematic theology that I can stand upon and say my creeds, and quote my references, um,
Right.
and and argue from a place of firm strength, firm belief. What would change your mind? Nothing.
Right.
Nothing will change my mind. Whereas I think when you live with uncertainty, and somebody says, what, and you can say, well, here's where I'm at right now. That's not where I was 20 years ago, and it's probably not where I'm going to be 20 years from now, but here's where I am currently. And somebody says, well, what would change your mind? Evidence, revelation, insight. Those things would change my mind. My mind can be changed.
Right.
If God wants to reveal something new to me, she can do that.
Right.
Um, it's I'm open and available to
Yeah.
revelation, and to being, to learning, to being some new creative possibility that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah, which is awesome. Um, could I share? Uh,
Yeah.
the another thing in Christianity as we see it here is that there is an identification with the intellect. It's the intellect that decides.
Yeah.
And therefore I have to hold on to my beliefs,
Yes.
intellectual beliefs. And
Yes.
and I believe what was shown to me when I went
Yeah.
to training for the things that I shared, how to do these things. Um, I wouldn't go because I didn't think God was like that, or I was like that, or I should go, right? Like it was this big, I had to like be like going to die.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'll go. So I go and it was great. And I'm st just getting my feet wet. I'm like, all right, well, F this and F that. Like, well, hole. And I'm just getting my, feet. And what happens every time I meditate for like months? What comes? One scripture comes. And it's the whole Peter and the keys to the kingdom and all that. It's an amazing chapter. It would not go
Mhm.
away. It would not go away for months. And what Spirit did with me on that, I believe, is move me from understanding it here. It took months to understanding it here because I grew up Catholic and like this all means the Catholic Church gets power or and a lot of the apostolic succession and all that. It's all power,
Mhm.
right? But I don't read it like that anymore. I'm like, what do I read? I see Jesus says, who am I? And Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, flesh and blood didn't tell you this, Peter. My Father in heaven told you this.
Mhm.
And on this rock I will build my assembly.
Mhm.
So I have a rock. It's direct
Mhm.
experience. People don't
Yeah.
understand that it's a rock, but it is a rock. It's much deeper.
Yeah.
It's not sinking sand. I can
Right.
rely on direct experience, and it causes me to do weird shit,
Hmm.
right? And it makes my life weird. But it's like, okay, every moment, every day, every moment, okay, here we are, where are we going? What's going on? In my work, I like to say, what's the perception? What's true in perception? What's possible? What do I perceive that's possible? Then from there we can choose an act. Right? Like from the solid rock of God.
Hmm.
And that's really different. And unfortunately I have a very flexible partner and very, because we do weird things. Um, um, but and bless my partner. If I had done that whole like equally yoked thing, I'd be so screwed, right? It's because like my understanding is constantly shifting. And so like instead, I just get listened to like, cool, instead of like, wait, you have to believe what you did when we met. It's really nice.
Hmm.
Chose well. So anyway, I just want to say that like it's like there is a rock on which we can stand. And then I just want to say this, I am in love with that chapter because like it was used to shift me. And
Yeah.
and like just in case we think it's Peter, like the end of the chapter, Peter is being Peter as usual, you because he's got spiritual experience, but he's also extraordinarily wonderfully human. And
Yes.
Jesus is like, well, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be tortured and I'm gonna die. And Peter's like, no. And Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan.
Hmm.
Because in that moment, Peter is keeping him from his calling. Peter's
Hmm.
saying, from a human perspective, from my perspective, Peter's saying, no, you can't go do what is your call. And Jesus
Hmm.
is like, no, not the voice.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's really fascinating, I think. Because we want to be like, oh, well, Jesus crowned me your leader from the people who crowned him. And it's just like, it's just crazy. It's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know that passage is often used to establish the hierarchy that is continued to this day.
Hmm.
That has done enormous harm.
Yes. Terrible one. Yeah.
And when Jesus is upon this rock, it- what does this refer to? The word this. And that's an important question. How you answer that question
Yeah.
divides history.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's apostolic progression or whatever it's called. And then there's also the idea that on the rock is saying that Jesus is the Lord. And
Hmm.
it's just not it's not my experience. People have that story.
Yeah.
Um, but sure, whatever. But how about we do what he says then?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, whatever. I have something else if it's okay. Is this a good time
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
go
sure,
back
go for it.
to where is it? You're talking. Okay, so I also another thing that is real for me is that when I haven't in the old days I was reading the Bible like it was all I was reading for a long time. And now, I haven't really, I mean, I pull up parts, but I haven't read the whole thing in a long time. But my perception is that the parables are basically almost always introduced by this is what the realm of God is. This is what the realm of
Yeah.
heaven is.
The
Pretty
kingdom of
much
heaven is
always.
like
Pretty much
a
always.
farmer who sows seeds, or the
Right.
kingdom of heaven is like a woman searching for a coin, or
Right.
anyway, yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So as a mystic, okay, so with this uh Carlos Castaneda has Don Juan. Don Juan says in Castaneda, he talks about the two attentions. It's one way to look at this. There's this is a not a perfect translation. There's the everyday attention, and then there's the attention on what's going on in the world of spirit or energy. So I believe that Jesus is trying to tell us over and over and over what this realm of heaven God is and
Hmm.
how to live in it. I
Hmm.
really believe like that's what he's doing. And so, but okay, so there's that. And then as a mystic, as a seer, I perceive all the time, like my work, it's like what I do. I do it in my real life, I do it in my spiritual practice, I do it in my work, it's all day long. I'm looking at what is happening under the microscope with the water, and I'm translating that to this world in language and paradigm. But it doesn't, never does or will, from my perspective, will it directly translate because spirit is spirit and physical is okay. So physical is part of God and everything, but it's not the same. Like, is this
Yeah.
world we're talking about? And so all day long, what I do is I speak in metaphor, I speak in parables, I speak in pictures and stories and like a lot. And so I feel like I understand what I'm like doing the same thing and
Hmm.
ish. And so when Jesus is talking in parables, it's stuff that people can relate to. It's the farm animals and the neighbors and also concepts of heaven from my perspective, heaven and hell. Concepts, he's just speaking in metaphor, but it doesn't mean those metaphors are true or hysterically accurate or what he thinks it is.
Yeah.
It's just relatable. So that's just my perspective. And so when it comes to when he's talking about the ones that you thought you were saying were uncomfortable around the idea of hell, it's something to consider that he's just using the metaphor,
Right.
just like the Gehenna, or however you say that word, right? It's just a metaphor.
Yeah.
Um, it's not like we're going to live in some garbage dump that smells and
Right.
smoky, whatever. And so, but but I mean, my whole thing about that, I mean, really honestly, my whole thing with the hell that Jesus does talk about from my perspective is his perspective of what it would like to be separated from the Father, to be separated from this experience of the realm of the divine. It would be hell for him. And it's no
Hmm.
surprise that so many people find this life to be, strutting and fretting on the stage, to be feel like a brief candle, to all these things that it's just so fucking horrible to be here. Like, yeah, it is because there's no life in it for you.
Yeah.
It's it's hell.
Yeah.
It's like we're living in our horrible emotions and needs and desires and control and survival. It's like, yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
And for Jesus, I think his felt sense, it seems to me, his felt sense would be it would be so much worse because he lived in heaven on earth. And
Yes.
you that makes earth really way better from my experience, not every minute, but it makes it so much better that the idea that the Father or the realm of God would be gone is just absolutely hell, devastating. That's my perspective. And that's part of my intention to live into that and to share that. Like it's just like, oh my gosh, you guys, like we can be like having root beer floats all the time while we're living. How awesome would that be? Like, we can be
Yeah.
whatever. Um, it's like this is possible. Do you want a root beer float?
Yes, I do. Why, yes, I do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wouldn't. Right.
Yes, please.
So, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to get that in because it really changes. Like if we under it, like with the possibility that he's speaking in metaphor,
Yes.
takes away the whole story about he's saying that hell is real and you're.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that matches the text as well.
So, are you waning? What's your deal?
Uh, yeah, I think so. As a first go around, especially with a complete stranger,
Who the hell are
who
you?
I thought I knew. It's really this is really funny. You got to have a sense of humor
Yeah.
because this is just good stuff, I'm tickled that we ended up have meeting and having this conversation, and also wildly amused that I completely mixed you up with somebody that I know.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, she has two Facebook profiles. Wendy Huber, and I think she actually does have a couple of profiles.
Oh,
Um,
good. I'm not the only one.
yeah, and I'm not sure, which is which or how she uses them. So I just got completely screwed up in my head that I thought you were her, and so I thought I was having a conversation with a local Episcopal priest who and so where are you located? I mean, you don't have to give me a city and
Yeah, yeah.
state or whatever, but
We've lived for 3.5 years now. Many years. 3.5 years we've lived. Um, not with a one place. And
okay.
in about 2 2/3 years ago, I mean, 1 2/3 years ago, we said that living out of our car into places is just too hard. And we got an RV, so we live and work out of the RV. I'm in Florida now, Um, I'm about an hour and a half above Tampa.
Okay.
Um, by springs and beautiful living water. And we also live in the summer we have been, and I intend to, in Copper Harbor, which is like the really top of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan into Lake
Oh,
Superior.
wow.
And
I've lived
and
up
in
there.
between and Asheville. Did you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's so delicious. So we're mobile and it's mostly
Nice.
awesome. It's kind of a pain, but it's mostly awesome.
I've lived out of an RV.
Yeah.
Um, for about 6 months, I lived in an RV, and my husband and I, this last maybe 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, we had sold our RV and now we got another one, and we've always had it in the back of our minds that that style of living suits us very well.
Good. There's so much good about it. Yeah. Yeah. We're living on this wildlife refuge right now. I
Oh
talked to them.
wow.
I'm like, hey, I want to give you money. Can we live in the corner here of this big property? So we have like an
Yeah.
emu going by all the time, and dogs and farm animals
Wow.
sounds, and our the guy who was here, he just came by. They they grew up these little turtles, and they're big enough, so I mean, it's just adorable. Yeah.
Wow. What a
Yeah.
cool way to live.
Yeah. So we're,
Well, that's
so
fascinating.
blessed. Yeah, it's just like, where do I want to give my money to? It's like I
Yeah.
want to give it. These people are like rescuing animals that are hurt by cars and hurt and upset all the time, wild animals, and
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um,
Oh,
so
how cool.
yeah. So, our original question was about worship. I just want to conclude and say I just said it. It's like get we can one way to talk about it is that we get to live with root beer floats. That's the first time I've ever used that metaphor. Um, all the time. It's like,
Yes.
and the root beer float is the direct experience of a different world that
Mhm.
is awesome and says we're
Yeah.
awesome. It's like
Hmm.
says all the good things and all those
Yeah.
blessings they talk about in the Bible are like available.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
real.
I like how you've redefined the word so that it has meaning, so that so that it has it's life-giving to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I like how I think that's what I also seek to do, is find ways to redefine things that have traditionally been stumbling blocks for me, redefine them so that I can live with them, so that I can make them part of my furniture, without them ruining my house. You
Right.
know?
Right. And, to put it together with what something you said about its service is,
Yeah,
what I feel when I'm matching my partner's socks.
yeah,
I'm in love and
yeah,
I'm doing service. That's
yeah,
exactly how it feels for
yeah,
me. Like that's part of why I use the word, and it feels funny to apply it to human, but it's like in that human relationship, I get to get metaphor for something beyond that. And it's like I love, I mean, it's like I don't like to clean, blah, 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 right? But I love to do laundry for my partner.
yeah,
Mine gets done too. But I just for some reason I'm just like, it's just I'm connected and of service and realizing the oneness that we are.
yes,
And like, so if we can bring that to it, it's nothing to do with anybody being better or higher
yeah,
or me being shit. It has nothing to
Yeah.
do with that. It means that I get to experience intimacy
Yes.
in ways
Yeah.
that are beyond fucking or whatever.
Yeah. I'm on board with that.
Awesome.
I think when you express it that way, I think that that's a match, you know. And I think we get to redefine and reclaim words that have gone sideways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we do it all the time, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and redefine them in ways so that we can use them without them being triggering. We can reclaim them and say these are our words, and here's what they actually mean to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do honor that it is triggering if we're hearing it a different way. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, but we're just walking each other home. We're just helping each other be free. And
Yes.
so thank you. Thank you so much for playing. Yay.
Likewise. And I love
Awesome.
your use of the word playing too. I've seen you use that a lot. Because and and it kind of I've got kind of my own frame for that because in music, um, I'm a musician, and and the way music is was traditionally taught, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, right?
As
And
humans.
right, exactly. And so, okay, well, you're going to sing. Okay, make sure you raise your soft palate, make sure your tongue is low, and and your vowels have to be pure, and your support has to come from here. And so your brain is all caught up in all of this, all of the things you have to do right. And so you're constantly assessing yourself and criticizing yourself and saying, no, you didn't do that right. Your pitch was a little bit under there, you pushed too hard there, you didn't
Oh
raise your
God.
soft palate, your diction wasn't just right. There's this constant inner critic going and going and going
Um,
and going. And I took a class many years ago called the Voice Care Network, and they talked about how that mentality has ruined music for musicians.
yes.
And they said, as it turns out, we don't do our best work when we are being criticized. That we do our best work when we feel safe. And when somebody criticizes you, it makes you feel like you're not safe.
Yes.
Um, and so they did you've heard of the inner game of tennis. Um, and apparently, the guy who wrote this book came to this university and did a little demo, and he put people on a tennis court, and he said, "Okay," he said, "what I want you to do is just talk about where the motion of the ball." So the person said, "Okay, the ball's coming toward me. The ball bounced. I'm hitting the ball back. That person, it bounced. They hit the ball back," and they just described what happened without judgment, right?
Right.
And the interesting thing was, then they said, okay, now when you hit the ball back, tell me whether it falls on this side of the line or the other side of the line. So they were hitting the ball back. And because they were focused on the line, the ball came very close to the line pretty much every single time. This person wasn't a tennis player, didn't know what they were doing. But because
Wow.
they were saying it's on this side of the line, it's on that side of the line, they kept hitting it close to the line. Then the instructor said, okay, now you have to hit the line.
Oh,
So there became a shift from observing what happened to having to try to get it right. And now the person couldn't get it anywhere near the
I know,
line. It
right? We're
was the ball
screwed.
was over there, it was way over there. They missed the ball completely, whiffed and didn't hit the ball, but they could not hit the line when they were trying to. And that's what we discovered about music is that if you try to get it right, sing it on pitch, raise the soft palate, get those consonants lined up,
Oh,
do this, do that, stand right, shoulders back, chest up, blah, blah, blah. And get your breath low and, lock it in and whatever else we all put into people's heads that they have to do. When there's all this have to, or should do, we don't do our best work. We're afraid to try. We're afraid to experiment. We're not creative.
Mhm.
But if you shift the perspective and say, well, what would happen if I tried this? Or what would happen if I tried that? And it's a mentality of play,
Yes.
right? It's a
Yeah.
mentality of experimentation. What about this? What
Mhm.
about that? What would it look like if you sang walking? What would it look like if you stand on one foot? What would it feel like? What does it feel like if you think of this image while you sing? And not trying and not shoulding, but just playing and saying, we're going to play with this idea. Let's play with this idea. And it's not that there's a right way to do it the way one should or must do it, but it's let's try that on
Mhm.
and see how that feels. And so when
Yeah,
you say
it's
thank
great.
you for playing, that's what that brings forward to me, is that whole concept of we get
Yes.
to try on ideas. We don't have to own them and we don't have to get it right, but we
Yes.
get to play with this idea and
Yes.
and see what it feels like. And some things will fit and some things won't now, and maybe it'll be different tomorrow, but
Yes.
we'll play again tomorrow and see what happens when we do it
Yeah.
that way. But when you open that realm of playing, it doesn't bring to mind that there's a right and a wrong way, or that there is an only one way.
Yeah.
it it
Which is,
brings to mind it brings to mind that we all get to try on stuff, and I
yeah.
love that. I
Amen.
like it sets a framework where people can enjoy it without feeling like, oh no, that wasn't the right answer actually.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Whatever. Yeah.
Where people are saying this is the right way to do it, and what you just said was wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I'll prove it by quoting this Bible verse at you.
That'll do it. There's a
Yeah,
million other verses that say other things, but whatever.
yeah, but
That'll
I
do
will
it.
prove this question and answer it once and for all with my legal document here.
Yeah. Yeah. And they found with athletes, the whole idea is, we learn new things, we learn new things, we learn new tricks and stuff, but the whole thing is when the athletes are in play, when they're in flow, when they're in play, when they're in flow, like the whole thing is to get over ourselves. They're getting over themselves. They're not self-reflective. They're hitting the ball.
Yeah,
Um, and then when things go funny or things go wrong or they get poked, then they go back to the all those things you have to think about and forget it. They're
yeah,
not geniuses anymore.
no,
It's all over. Game's over. The
yeah,
game is literally over, and that they can't play
yeah,
anymore. They have to,
yeah,
and we can't think through all the things the body has to do. Michael and I were always laughing about um what's it called? Like how does the bird know how to fly? How does
yeah,
how does it do the physics equate and the calculus fast enough to be able to catch that insect, right? It's ridiculous.
yeah.
Right? They're
Of course
not
it is.
right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're
Their
trying
mother told them how to do it right
Mother told them how to do it
and
right, and
criticized
you
them
better
when they
make
got it
sure
wrong.
you can make sure
You
you don't
know?
forget um your multiplication tables while you're flying because you are so screwed. You'll fall right down.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just so crazy, So they're just flying, they're just playing, and they're not
yeah,
tempted like we are
yeah,
to go into the intellect, and then where we go from there is good and evil, then we go right to
yeah,
we're really screwed. Um, So, and that's what you're talking about, right? It's just like, where
yeah,
are we going to just play? Or do I have to think through this? Because if I have to think through it, I can't do it.
yeah, yeah,
It's so miserable.
yeah.
Awesome.
And a lot of us are stuck
Yeah. 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 So
and
maybe we'll go
haven't
back to
haven't
where it was.
found that.
Yeah. we're stuck. And well, I'm going to go back to where we started, that you have stake. And like, what do I care about is talking to people who care about these things, because most people don't. Most people are just like, yeah,
Yeah.
yada, yada. I dotted the I's, I crossed the T's, I did the four spiritual laws, get out of my way so I can do something
Yeah.
important with my life. Um, and, but there's a few of us that are just like, wait a minute, this is where the juice is right here. How do
Mhm.
I get good juice?
This matters.
It really matters.
How we answer these questions matter because they affect exactly who we are and how we live, and they make some of us in and some of us out. And you know, I mean, it has that potential, I think,
Yeah.
and we've seen how that plays out
It's,
when there are
yeah.
people who are in and people who are out,
Yeah. Our society's doing
and
so
when
well right
God
now.
sides with some of them. Huh?
Our society's doing so well right now. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah,
It
no,
looks very
exactly.
pretty.
No, you
Very pretty.
nailed it. That's it. Is that um, we've as human beings, there's that path of scapegoating where you call people names and say you're other, you're part of the other group.
Yeah.
You are Republican, you're a Democrat, you are a Protestant, you're a Catholic, you are this nationality or that nationality, this race, this sexuality, that sexuality. We have all of these different ways to put a label on somebody and say you are not part of my group, you are other, and therefore I get to dismiss you because you are not part of my tribe.
Oh, so
So
painful.
I And exactly, but that's why I think that's why when I talk about stake, we all have a stake in this, whether we realize it or not.
Yes.
We can't afford to scapegoat. We can't afford our tribalism. It's the cost is much too high for to other people and then reject them and think that, well, me first, as long as my group succeeds, it doesn't matter what happens to your group. um,
Yeah.
and we can't afford that thinking. We either all succeed or none of us do. We either
Yeah.
all get ahead or none of us do. We can't claim power and prestige for ourselves thinking that it doesn't matter what happens to the people who are not like us. Whatever happens to any of them happens to us. We do it to ourselves, literally.
Yes. Literally. And that's Jesus.
And that
Straight
is
up.
exactly Jesus's message.
Yeah.
That's why he said, is if you do it to anybody, you're doing it to me, because you literally are. It
Literally
literally,
are.
and I love what Nadia Bolz-Weber says, whenever you draw a line between yourself and another person, Jesus is on the other side of that line,
Mm.
always,
Yeah.
no matter who it is, no matter how they define themselves or how wrong you think they are. That's
Yes.
Jesus over there.
Amen. Ah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. All right.
Likewise.
I'm gonna shut this off.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Are you
Likewise.
comfortable sharing this?
Yeah. I
That
don't
is
have a problem with
gorgeous.
anything that you or that I said. I would say
Awesome.
it to anybody.
Great. And I
But I'm
will,
curious, where does it go?
um, because I, I have two kinds of, it turns out this is like just an interview, in which I talked more than I usually do. Usually interviews, I barely ever say anything, honestly. Um, but there's two places I tend to put them. One is, Everyday Modern Mystics, but I'm going to put this in Soul Leadership.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'll put it in the Soul
Yeah, feel
Leadership
free.
group, and I will I'll get you the link if you want it or want to share it
Yeah,
or
I'd
whatever.
love to see it.
Um,
I
but
probably won't watch it because I can't stand to watch myself talk.
I had to
But
learn.
but it's it's nice to know where it is, and then if there are any comments and stuff, I'd be curious to see how people interact and what comes forward for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are a soul leader. Do you own that? Does that feel right to you? You are out
Hmm?
there being it. You're being the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes we all feel a little bit helpless in big world events. I'm not the president of the United States.
Thank God.
You know what I mean? Why do I always go to that but then I think, well, what can I do? Well, I'm a musician. So when I run rehearsals for my choir, how do I treat my choir? How do I talk to my choir? What kinds of things do I say to my choir? What kind of music do I choose? Is all informed by my belief in what's important. Um, so, things like, at the beginning of every rehearsal, I give my choir a few moments to take some deep breaths and center themselves
Nice.
and connect with the divine within them. Um, and at the end of every rehearsal, I remind them to tell the person next to them that they enjoyed singing with them. um and because I believe people want to connect with each other, and I believe it's incredibly important. We all need community, we all need connection. And so when you tell the person that you're sitting next to that you enjoyed singing with them and how much you appreciate them in a non-creepy way. They do it, you know because they
Yeah.
want to.
Oh,
They want
yeah.
to. All they're waiting for is permission, really.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm like, well, that's my sphere. That's what I can do. I can't veto or sign laws. I'm not a judge at the Supreme Court. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
that's not my skill set. I'm a musician.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do I do within that realm that furthers my beliefs?
Yep. Gorgeous. Perfect.
So
And
when you
singing
say soul
together is
leader, that's yeah, go
totally.
ahead.
And singing together is one of the most bonding community things that we can do. So thank you for helping that happen.
Are you a musician?
No. I play guitar like Coco. I
Yeah.
I uh I worked as a Girl Scout resident camp leader for 6 summers. And in that I did some, song leading and stuff, but it's like so
Right
organic.
on.
Um, yeah. Yeah, I know like two sets of progressions. That's all you need.
And I just want to encourage you to answer that question in the future. Yes, I am a musician, because you are.
Yeah.
You really are. And it's a sad thing. There's some research that was done where they went into a kindergarten class and said, "How many of you are artists?" And all the little kids raised their,
Right.
"I'm an artist." And how many of you are musicians? Yes, I'm a musician. They all
Yeah.
are. They're all
Yeah.
everything. And then 2 years later, second grade, they come back and they say, "How many of you are musicians?" "No, I can't sing."
Oh.
"Johanna has a lovely voice." I'm not. I'm not a musician.
Mm.
Who of you are artists? I'm not an artist. Johnny is really good at drawing. How many of you are good? Fill in the blank. Within 2 years, they all were capable of anything, and then suddenly they weren't anymore.
Yeah.
Suddenly they'd
Very
been
sad.
taught. In 2 years, they'd been taught that there were things that they were not good at and things that they couldn't do, and that's heartbreaking.
It is.
And I saw that go across your face when I asked you. I
I
saw
know.
I saw that inner awareness of that you are a musician, and then but outwardly, no, I can't say that because I'm talking to a musician and he'll judge me.
Yeah, because
He'll
I know
he'll say, "No,
two
you're not
two
really a
cord
musician."
protections. I know, right?
Right?
It's okay if they're 7-year-olds, but
As an adult woman, I'm not allowed to say that I'm an artist if my pictures look like fill in the blank, you know?
My nails are no better now than when I was 5, but I can still draw
Yeah.
them. Actually, the
Yes,
honest truth is I sing like all the time. I sing all the time, like all the time, but not for prime time.
exactly.
But I do sing
Exactly.
all the time, and it's what a blessing, right? What a blessing to play. What a blessing to be able to sing and
Yes.
dance, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
So,
It's a privilege. It really is something that makes being human much more sustainable. Getting to make music, getting to create art,
yeah. So
getting
thank
to
you for
connect with other people.
doing that in the world. It's it's a wonderful thing to provide the structure for people,
Yeah.
and it's so community connecting, and
Yes.
it's also helps people access a divine connection.
Yes. They don't even understand in their minds what their souls recognize when they're doing it. And
Hmm.
that's where what you were talking about earlier is how we know things. You know, we can know things in our bodies or we can know things in our minds. Um, and their bodies recognize, their soul recognizes what's happening, even if they don't understand it. That there's that when you join your heart with other people's hearts to
Yeah.
make music, that something deeper happens than just singing the right, creating the right notes at the right time and doing it all correctly. It's not that. That's not what it is. It looks like that maybe sometimes, and it feels like that sometimes, but on a much deeper level, we are connecting to each other in a much deeper way. And they're finding evidence now that, for example, heartbeats start to sync up, and
Yes.
things are they're finding physiological evidence that more is happening than we realized when we sing together.
Yes.
And what I love about singing together is that it's so non-ego centered. um if you watch somebody on a stage singing by themselves, that's an ego, right, in a way. And we're all there to witness this ego. And good, great, I love
Yeah.
that too. Not judging that's wrong, but what I love about corporate singing is that it's so egalitarian. We all release our right to be seen as an individual, and to succeed and get ahead as an individual. We put that aside, we set that aside, so that we can create something together that we none of us could create by ourselves.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this world where we're constantly defining humanity in terms of the worst that it's capable of, it's a blessing to be part of something where we're creating something that defines humanity in terms of the best, the most
Mm.
creative, the most egalitarian, um, things that human beings are capable of creating. We're defining that with our actions in a different
Yes.
way. And I
Yes.
love,
And
I love,
primal.
it's a lucky thing that I get to do that.
Yes. It's really a blessing. And it's primal. It's like early human before any of this other shit.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
Like
We were
before
singing and dancing. I mean, the
way
birds do it, you
the
know?
birds do it. Yeah. Yeah, we were doing it way before we everything became an intellectual construct.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Ah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
I
you,
know it's hard
Paul.
to end, isn't it?
And I heard I didn't listen. It was like, Wendy, don't shut off that video. But I'm like, I need to ask him this question. He made me comfortable. I'm just like, I didn't listen, and now
Yeah.
we don't have that video. But thank you for sharing.
No,
I really appreciate it.
it's been a pleasure. I'm glad I got to know you, and I'm glad that you initiated this. I feel lucky to
Yay.
be here.
Me too. All right. Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Also with you and your partner.